How are we doing this morning? All right. So I wanted to today go over. Well, let's wait for some more people to come in. We'll see who all comes in this morning. Because right now we only have like 5 or 6 people. Oh, now we have 7. Yeah, let's just give it a little bit of time. How are we doing? I feel like Wednesdays are always my mornings when I'm not feeling with it. I think it's because this is, for me, the last day of my work week, right? My days off generally are Thursday and Friday. So they used to be Friday and Saturday, but I started realizing I always have shit to do on the weekends. Always. Like I'm always either like hosting some sort of event or doing something or other, going to a protest, and I was just like, I need an actual fucking day off. Like, I need an actual day off. So my days off are Thursday and Friday now. So Wednesday for me is kind of my Friday. So by this point in the week, I'm always fucking exhausted. And I've just been feeling a little bit weird this morning. My wife and I had to have like the talk yesterday. We've had the talk a couple of times about like if things get worse, right? If things get worse, are we going to leave? And at what point? What has to happen for us to decide like, okay, it's time to pack our bags and go? And the longer we discuss this, we just kind of realize we don't have anywhere to go. And so it just becomes a depressing conversation every time we have it. So I've been kind of like, I don't know, sad this morning, kind of bummed out, trying to get some coffee in me and perk up. Stream will probably help. And like, we're kind of two minds about this, because like, the reason that Heather wants more to stay is because we have kids, and the only reason I would want to go is because we have kids. Like, she doesn't want to uproot the kids, and I don't want to keep the kids here if it's not viable, you know? And I mean, we're both kind of right, you know? There's no good option here. There's no good option here. So I have friends who talk about leaving like it's easy to do. Yeah, really and truly. And I've noticed more and more of my friends talking about leaving. And I'm like, I don't know where y'all are planning on going, or what y'all are planning on doing. I don't think we can probably leave. I don't think that that's probably in the cards for us, but and I don't want to. I love my home. I love living here. This house is mine, and there is definitely a part of me that's like, you can pry this out of my cold dead hands, you know? Yeah, no, there's no good fucking option, man. No good fucking option. I'm so tired of this shit. Alright, so today we're going to be discussing the clobber passages. Alright? Who knows what a clobber passage is? Anybody got an answer for me? All right. So, a clobber passage is a passage in the Bible that makes a certain group of people feel abused, beaten down, or unloved. And my vape just broke. Give me a second. All right. So, quoting the Bible to condemn people. Bible verses used to win an argument. Yes. Those are both true as well. Generally, though, it's passages throughout the Bible that are used to make people feel less than. They are used as an excuse to make certain people feel less than, whether that is women, gay people, people of color. And today, we are going to go over the clobber passages about queer people. Because while I know there are some passages that are used against women and against people of color, I am not as familiar with the arguments that evangelicals use for those. And I would be out of my element. And I don't like to be out of my element and speak on things I don't understand. So, like, I know what a lot of the passages are. Like, for example, a lot of, like, the story of, I believe, Ham or Cain are used against black people quite often. There's some passages that, let us be perfectly honest here, are approving of slavery. And we can tackle those at some point. That is not a topic I have for in my brain today, though, and that is also a topic that I would like to get a black minister in here to discuss with me, because I don't feel I can do the subject justice. And then there are some within Timothy that are against women as well. So, let's go to Genesis 19, verse 1 through 38 first. Now, I'm not going to read this whole 38 passages to you. If you would like to look it up for yourself, you can. But this is the in the beginning story. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth, right? So, let's pull up the right Bible translation here that we use. NRSVUE. There we go. All right. So, this is usually, generally, what people will use this for is to say God only created male and female, and he put them together as male and female. Now, and that male and female are the only genders that God created, and that they were meant to go together, right? Now, here's the thing. So, I had a rabbi explain this passage to me like this. Yes, God created male and female. But God also created, and we read this in the very beginning, in Genesis 1, verse 5, and then we see it throughout Genesis 1. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening and there was morning the first day. So, God created the evening and morning, right? Now, are evening and morning the only times of day that exist? No, obviously not, right? So, there is nothing stating that these were the only things God created, that these were the only genders God created, that these were the only, and that these two genders were meant to go together. Just because God does not mention something does not mean that God condemns it. That is ridiculous. God does not mention cars in the Bible because they did not have them at the time. So, that does not mean God condemns cars. Now, one could say, okay, well, gay people definitely did exist in biblical times, which they did. However, the way relationships were viewed in this time was very, very... lol, God condemns twilight and dusk. Yes, exactly. So... the way people viewed relationships in this period of time was very, very different than we view them today. They did not view them in terms of sexuality. So here's what there were, okay? There, in this time, and this is the best way I can explain it, okay? In terms of sexuality, there weren't gay people and straight people. There were tops and bottoms, all right? They just had tops and bottoms. And so, I have a feeling... Let's actually get into Leviticus 18:22, because this is a good jumping off point for this. This is the most common one you will see. And this could be figured out if Christians spoke to like one single rabbi in their entire lives. Now, I have had several different interpretations of this passage given to me, right? So, I was just reading some of the other interpretations that are in this particular article. But, so I've seen several different interpretations of this passage. Now, one could make the argument on this one. This is the one that you could definitely make the argument that it is prohibiting same-sex relations. All right. However, I like to follow the law of Christ, which is to love God and love your neighbor. And I think if I am creating interpretations of passages, because every passage is interpreted, if I am creating interpretations of passages that do cause me to not love God or my neighbor, then I need to rethink my interpretation of that passage. So, there is the argument is that Leviticus was only for Levite priests. And that is a fine argument. I don't find it particularly compelling, right? Any evangelical that you're arguing with isn't going to give a shit, all right? They are not going to give a shit. All right, so, sorry, I was trying to catch up on chat because I have to, like, get out of chat. I don't have, like, a nice setup up here. I just have to go between tabs. So, this is the Leviticus 18:22 and 20:30 are the most compelling arguments, I would say, to forbid same-sex attraction. But, as I said, it is, in my opinion, better to find an interpretation that does not cause harm to people, because that's what we're told to do. In fact, Jesus does this quite often. Asks his fellow Jewish brothers, sisters, and siblings to interpret the Torah in a way that does not cause harm to others. So, what other arguments are there? And I have seen several for this passage in particular, right? So I have heard from several Jewish scholars that this is talking about incest, that this is about male and male relationships between two people who are family members. I have seen that this is sorry, I'm looking at some of the ones they have on here. I have heard the argument as well that this is about, we were talking about tops and bottoms, right? That this was about a lot of men in this time. There was a lot of war, things like that, battles, where people would use intercourse, penetration, as a form of dominance. There were also certain sexual practices of men and young boys, though I do not think it is probably talking about that. At least not here. Now, there is a passage later that we could make that argument with. But the most compelling argument to me, all right, in my opinion, what I believe God was asking of us in these passages. If you look at a great deal of Leviticus, a lot of it is a health manual, right? A lot of it is a manual on how to not be gross, how to wash one's ass, and how to ensure that you're not screwing over your neighbors, right? This is about health and safety concerns. A great deal of Leviticus is that. Health concerns, safety concerns, and why to not steal other people's cattle, okay? That's the vast majority of this book. So, the argument I find most compelling for Leviticus 18:22 and 20:13, which is, I actually didn't read that, did I? So let's actually read Leviticus 18:22. All right. Now, in this translation, it says, "You shall not lie with a male as with a woman, it is an abomination." So, that's Leviticus 18:22. Now, I believe this article actually has a direct Hebrew translation. And with a male, not will you lie the lyings of a woman. It is an abomination. Leviticus 20:13 says basically the same thing, but it adds the penalty of capital punishment. So, we do not know what the lyings of a woman are. Okay, we don't. If the text had simply said, "Don't put your penis in the following locations," we'd have a better idea what it meant. Yep. So, this article, by the way, is by outreach.faith if you would like to follow along. This is an article I am using as well. So, let's see. So we have... I didn't tell you what I thought that was the most compelling. Now, like I said, this is a health and safety manual, right? So, we are a group of people living in the desert in ancient times. What do we not have? Doesn't it at most condemn specifically penetrative sex between two men? Pretty sure sex between two women wasn't even considered in the Bible, and relationships without sex wouldn't be condemned at all. There is a passage by Paul that can be interpreted that way. We will get to it. But yes, specifically, at most, it would condemn anal intercourse between two men, at most. Says nothing about mouth stuff, all right? Nothing about hand stuff, nothing about mouth stuff. So, and nothing about two men being in a loving relationship. We will actually talk maybe a little bit, if we have time during the stream, about David and Jonathan, but I doubt we will. We have a lot to get through, and we're already 21 minutes in. So, I think that, okay, so we're an ancient people living in a desert area, with very little sources of lubrication, and no antibiotics. I think that there probably was, during this time period, a ban on penetrative anal sex between men. Probably looked down upon for women as well. It was probably a dangerous act to engage in. It may have led to tearing, infection, things like that. And if you got a butt infection in ancient times, like, I mean, we do have to remember this is where the poop comes out, okay? If you get a butt infection in ancient times, you're dead. You're dead. You're gonna die. So, things aren't gonna end well for you. So I think that that was probably the thinking behind it at this time period. Now, how would we interpret this passage today if this is the case, right? I interpret it as a passage encouraging us to engage in safe sexual practices, to engage in sexual practices that do not cause harm to our partner, physically or psychologically. So, all right, let's see. What else we got here? All right, good old Sodom and Gomorrah, Genesis 19. This is, I feel, the easiest of these passages to, I do not understand how the belief that this is about homosexual relationships has persisted as long as it has. It is truly mind-boggling to me. I don't understand it because there is no point in this story that we are talking about anything remotely close to loving same-sex relationships at all. Nothing remotely close. By the way, like this stream. So what we are talking about in Sodom and Gomorrah is we are talking about a population of people who are engaging in sexual assault, specifically sexual assault of a angelic being. They are trying to engage in sexual assault of a messenger of God. Now, there is an underlying message within the story. Um, Often, heavenly hosts or strangers are used as a fill-in for immigrants or the unknown, people who are not familiar to the population. So, essentially, what is happening is these heavenly hosts are coming into this city, and the people of this city are taking advantage of them as people who do not know the area, as um, and trying to sexually exploit them. Um, that is what is happening in this story. There are people, strangers, who come to town, and the people of that town decide that instead of welcoming them into the town, giving them somewhere safe to be, the only person who does allow this to who does take them in is Lot. But the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, people of Sodom, I mean, they do not, um, they do not they do not welcome these people. Instead, they try to exploit them sexually. So, this passage, this story specifically, if we want to get somewhat literal about it, is about the human trafficking of immigrants. It is about strangers coming into a town and the people in that town exploiting them sexually. Now, what was I saying? Sorry, I just finished my coffee. It's still kicking into the old brain. But then we see in Isaiah, I believe. Is it Isaiah or Ezekiel? Give me a second. Ezekiel. Now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. Therefore I did away with them, as you have seen. So, as we can see, the sin of Sodom was not gay people. It was being arrogant, overfed, unconcerned, not helping the poor and needy, and the detestable things they did before God was the sexual exploitation of immigrants. So, that is where we are at with Sodom and Gomorrah. That, to me, is the most ridiculous. Like I said, I do not understand, for the life of me, how people are getting anything about loving same-sex relationships within this story. It is absurd to me, because to me it's just so very, very clear what exactly this story is discussing, which is sexual assault and exploitation. And then it is clarified, like I said, within Ezekiel, that this was also about pride, arrogance, and apathy towards the poor. I think sometimes evangelicals don't want to admit that this is about pride, greed, and apathy towards the poor, because they want to continue being prideful, arrogant, greedy, and unconcerned with the poor. So, let's go on to our next passage. I love how y'all... Do y'all have anything that you wanted to discuss specifically? I noticed that the chat's gotten somewhat quiet. I think that's 100% it, and the whole not really reading the book. Yeah, A lot of evangelicals, I think, are just literally um, not reading this. They're not reading the text. And even if they do read the text, one way I have noticed evangelicals read the text is they will just pick these passages out, right? They're just picking these passages out. And they are, when you just pick passages out of any book, any text, um, I'm in and out at the ER, so sorry. Hey, don't worry about it. If you can't type in, that's fine. You're obviously doing stuff. Um, do not worry about that. Um, but where was I at? Like I said. All right. My brain it got rid of that thought. If you guys remember, let me know. This is why you don't spend your 20s doing psychedelics, kids. Okay. Okay. All right. I remember. So they will pick these passages out, just out of the Bible, and because of that, they are not getting these overarching themes that are happening throughout the text. Um, Things like God's uh, hatred of empire, for example, or God repeatedly, over and over and over and over and over again, telling people to care for the poor. They don't want to care for the poor. A rabbi once told me, the same rabbi actually, that if you see something in the Bible over and over and over and over and over again, it's because it's something that people really don't want to follow, and God has to tell them that over and over and over again. It's like when you're a kid and your parents tell you to do the dishes, right? How many times do your parents have to tell you to do the dishes? Probably a whole lot, because you don't want to do it. And so God tells us over and over and over again throughout the Bible to care for the poor and needy, because human beings have a bad habit of not wanting to do that. Hell yeah, bacon and eggs for breakfast. I'm very honest with myself that I cherry pick, because literally every Christian does. You have to. Anyone saying they don't is dishonest, because this is a text that contradicts itself. It contradicts itself. It was written by multiple authors over a great deal of time. Those authors did not have the same opinions. Of course, it's going to contradict itself. You can't... You cannot have an interpretation where you're not in some way, shape, or form cherry picking. That's impossible. Claiming that is not the case is intellectually dishonest. Caring for the poor is the point, and most churches do it as an afterthought. Yep. That's it. Okay. So, let us move along. All right. Romans 1:26-27. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even the women exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed shameful acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their error. Okay, so this is Paul. All right, it's Paul. So the first thing we need to remember, right, is that Paul is not Jesus Christ. Paul is not God. Paul is a man, a fallible man with many of his own personality quirks, who is wrong a great deal of the time. Now, that does not mean that Paul has no bangers. He does. It does not mean we have nothing to learn from Paul, or that Paul could not at times be incredibly wise. However, Paul had hang-ups on sex. He just did. This was something. Now, we can speculate on why that is. Some people think that he was asexual, that this worldview on sex came from his inability to understand why anyone would want to do this. Another worldview is that he was closeted. Paul talks about a thorn in his side, something that a temptation he cannot get rid of. And there are many people who believe that that was homosexuality or lust in general, and that this was more of a projection because this was something Paul was incredibly focused on. That he either had lusts for women or for men, and that he was ashamed, and that a lot of this is born out of Paul's shame. This is another interpretation of Paul's hang-ups on sexuality, was that Paul was following in the footsteps of the Stoics, and many Stoic, I believe it was the Stoic philosophers, like I said, coffee's still kicking in, believed that sex was a hindrance to spiritual enlightenment. And this is something we see throughout various religions across the world, so this would not have been unheard of. It is also a possibility that Paul wanted to encourage people into celibacy in order to not make new Roman soldiers, especially women. When it came to, but in which case, when it comes to this passage, why then would Paul have a problem with same-sex relationships, as they generally do not bear children? So I think there was a different hang-up around sexuality with Paul. I think the most likely thing is that he did see it as a hindrance to spiritual enlightenment. And the other thing we have to remember about Paul is that he literally, quite literally, thought Jesus was coming back tomorrow. He thought that the world was about to end, like, in a couple days. And we actually see throughout his writings him getting far more frustrated every time about the fact that it has not yet happened. So this is a man who truly believed that Jesus was going to return like in a week. So he was like, why would you do that? Why would you do that with other people? Why would you want to bring more children in the world? Jesus is coming back in like 48 hours, okay? Like, so, and Paul's belief on how Jesus would come back and how the resurrection would occur, that is very interesting. We will get into that some other time, because boy howdy, is it not what modern evangelicals, modern Christians in general, believe today. We can get to Matthew 19:12 if in a bit. I do, if we have time, I want to get to some more affirming passages, or passages that can be interpreted that way. Um, uh, this also, this article brings up that Paul argues from the standpoint of nature. We do not know what natural use signifies. Um, Paul is saying that these are unnatural relationships with one another. Well, what does that mean? What acts specifically are these people engaging in? We don't know. We don't know. I'm not here to kink shame ancient people right now, but apparently they were engaging in acts that Paul was disgusted by. And there's the argument made here that the same description, Paul uses the same description in Romans 11:24 to describe how Gentiles have been cut from what is by nature, a wild olive tree, and grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree. Here, an act contrary to nature creates being in a right relationship with God. So this, these relationships, these acts that people were engaging in, obviously Paul saw them as something that prevented these people from being in a relationship with God. Now, if I were to create some sort of modern interpretation of this, I would say, if I was taking Paul at face value, right, and I wanted to come up with an interpretation for this passage that fit more into the modern zeitgeist, I would say that you should not have sexual relationships where the that are used to like abuse one another, or that use another person's body simply for your own pleasure, instead of caring about the other person. I would say that this is about consent and using another person's body for abuse of the self or of them in some way. These are sexual acts that prevent one from being in relationship with God, and loving sexual acts between two people who care about one another deeply do not prevent you from being in relationship to God. So, First Timothy 1:10. So first off, Timothy, it was very likely not written by Paul. We have no idea, actually, what, who wrote the Epistle of Timothy. The Epistle to Timothy, I think it is, if I remember correctly. So, we do not know who wrote this. So, 1 Timothy 1:10. There are several epistles that we do not think they were actually written by Paul. And this is just the sexually immoral, men who engage in illicit sex, slave traders, liars, perjurers, and whatever else is contrary to the sound teaching. I mean, this is literally just, it's talking about, again, like Sodom and Gomorrah, it's talking about sexual exploitation. That's it. Hello, my love.
Hello.
Are you going out today?
Yeah, remember?
I know, but I thought you were going to cancel because you weren't feeling good.
No, I said I was probably going to go anyways, because I can't eat anyway, so.
Oh, okay.
I'm just going to get
Can I
it.
have a kiss?
Yes.
All right. I love you.
Hello. Goodbye.
Have fun. Okay. Sorry, I got distracted by my beautiful wife who smells incredible today. She's wearing some sort of rose-scented cologne. All right, Jude versus 6 and 7. I really hope she didn't lock the door. Give me a second. Let me make sure my wife didn't lock me out of the house. Oh, good. She has done that before. When I've been out here on the porch, she's like gone to go somewhere and just like accidentally locked the door behind her, and I don't have a key, so I wouldn't be able to get back in my house, and I'd be really sad. All right. Jude. Jude 6. And this brings up Sodom and Gomorrah again. Man, on some of these, I'm like, y'all are really stretching. Like, really stretching hard. All right, and that is the last of them. So, what do y'all think? Oh, we probably need to discuss that passage in Deuteronomy. Hold on. That was not mentioned here. Deuteronomy 22:5. All right. So this one is often used against trans people. All right. A woman must not wear a men's clothing, nor a man wear woman's clothing, for the Lord your God detests anyone who does this. Now, how do we explain this? How do, again, this is another one. You need to just read Jewish writings on this. Now, the argument I have seen used most often in this. Now, why? First off, why would God prohibit such a thing, right? And I have heard, now, one of these I cannot confirm. I have just heard it from other, from, like, ministers and rabbis I have spoken to over the years. This is something I would have to confirm in terms of like textual sources to know that if this was the case. But I have heard there was an issue around this time with assassins dressing as women to gain access to the bedchambers of men that they intended to kill. Okay? And so this was used to prevent these assassinations. I personally kind of love this because I feel now all I can imagine is that there was a group of like trans assassins that were just like going through like the ancient Middle East, like murdering kings. However, most Jewish folks, affirming Jewish folks that I have met today, they generally are like, well, if it's your apparel, then it's your apparel. A man, if you are a man and you own an article of clothing, then that's men's clothing. If you are a woman and you own an article of clothing, then that's a woman's clothing. So, so as long as you're not wearing garments that belong to someone else, then you're in the clear. All right. For me, gay and trans issues really are not brought up in the Bible enough to justify the fixation against them. This is absolutely true. As I said earlier in this stream, a rabbi once told me that if God has a big problem with it, he keeps bringing it up. If God has a big problem with it, he keeps bringing it up. And if people have a problem doing it, God keeps bringing it up. So, the fact that these things, even if there was some prohibition put into place, for whatever reason, these things are only brought up like a couple times, right? And people obviously kept doing them, right? Like, people kept being gay. People kept being trans. So, for God to never bring this up again, it must just not be much of a focus, to be honest. Ironically, that interpretation condemns stealing your partner's hoodie. Yeah, you can interpret this passage this way, okay? You can. God doesn't like it when you steal your partner's hoodie. God's seen it cause too many problems. He's like, then the relationship ends, and then you still have the hoodie, and then it's just a reminder, and you got to find something to do with it, Most of these passages really are used to deflect responsibility to the poor and not abusing sexual partners. It seems really and truly that's what it is. Yeah, a lot of this is just people wanting to deflect responsibility. We also have to remember, somebody brings up a good point, is that a lot of passages within the Torah are Jewish people trying to set themselves apart from the pagan cultures around them. So some of this stuff is literally just like them being like, oh, this is how we are setting our culture apart. If the pagans are doing it, so we are not going to. It really could be as simple as that. God being very State Farm singing there too. No. All right. So, as you can see, there is nothing within this book that condemns loving same-sex relationships or trans people. However, we have a few minutes. We could go through a couple things. So let's talk David and Jonathan. All right? David and Jonathan. All right. David and Jonathan, my favorite messy twinks. So, David, the chaotic bisexual of the Old Testament, there is a relationship described with his friend Jonathan. This relationship, in my personal opinion, does not have... Excuse you, Jonathan is clearly a bear. Fair. Okay, fair. I'll give you that one. God. I don't think there's much heterosexual explanation for David and Jonathan, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think you have to be a bit willfully ignorant to not think that they had a little something going on. Now, again, relationships were very different in the Bible than in biblical times than they are today. So what we see is a bit of, oh my God, they were roommates in the way that this is presented. However, there is a passage where these two men get naked with each other. Like, they get naked with each other. I believe, who is it that takes off their clothes? All right. All right, so here is the passage. No, it's Jonathan getting naked. Jonathan's the one getting naked. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. That's all his clothes. There's nothing else. At most, if all right, so now I'm having to look up ancient underwear, okay? This is where you guys have brought me to. I'm trying to figure out if, because underwear it seems may have been something that indicated a certain status in this culture. I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into this. Now the belt. The belt is what's confusing to me because let me see. I love how we're like trying to figure out how naked Jonathan was in this particular passage. How naked was Jonathan? All right. This is the NIV, I realized. So let's all right. So it seems like there may have been underwear, but still, just normal bro things. Just stripping down to your underwear with the boys, you know. But here's where things get really interesting, right? So, there is another passage where Jonathan has died in battle. He's died. And David is stricken with grief over the loss of Jonathan. And he says, "How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan lies slain upon your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. For greatly beloved you were to me. Your love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women." So, David obviously loved Jonathan more than he loved women. And this is what ultimately leads David down a path of corruption. Is this loss of Jonathan. So we have this passage, right? All right. Did I click out of my own? I did. I'm a dumb. Give me a second. I'm a big dummy. All right. All right. You should do more of these outside. The atmosphere is lovely. Yeah, no, I want to start doing these outside. It's just been too cold. Good luck at your AA meeting. How can this not be seen as a partnership? Like, how in denial are the straights? Very in denial. Very in denial. They're very, very in denial. I totally believe that deep platonic love exists, but when you frame it as he loves him more than women, that's obs about sexuality. Now, like, I would say so. I don't see, like, if you combine this with, like, bros getting naked in the forest, yeah, I feel like there's not a whole lot of heterosexual explanation here. Okay? I just feel like there's not. I feel like you are you at least have to explore the possibility that this was the case. Okay? You can't make a definitive statement that David and Jonathan were not gay. All right? You can't. There's too much evidence. All right? There's too much. So, then we are going to talk about the eunuchs. And that after that we will have to wrap up. So there are several passages within the Christian scriptures, the New Testament, in which Jesus addresses eunuchs. In I believe it is Matthew 19, if I remember correctly. Right after Jesus talks about divorce. Okay. For those who, the disciples said to him, "If such is the case of a man with his wife, it is better not to marry." But he said to them, "Not everyone can accept this teaching, but only to those whom it is given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let anyone accept this who can." Now, eunuchs are very, very interesting. If I ever went to college again, this is what I would be writing my dissertation on, is ancient eunuchs. Because eunuchs, this was not a lot of people, when they think of eunuchs, think of men who have been castrated in some way, right? And many times this was the case. I am not here to say it's not. However, that is not always the case. It was not always the case, and it was not, these people were not always assigned male at birth. It was a social role, similar to a gender role. I think one can make the argument that eunuchs are a third gender. Now, I know that the Talmud has some gender stuff in there as well, but I think one could make the argument of eunuchs existing as a sort of, because it was a social role, as a sort of third gender outside of male and female. And these people had specific duties in society. They would often be used as attendants to women, to help them with their duties or protect them from men who may want to harm them. They were often known for their wisdom, as they were kind of seen as existing between these two worlds of gender, and so they could give advice to powerful political leaders. So eunuchs are very, very interesting on that front. And I would say that Jesus's acceptance of this eunuch is affirming of people who exist outside of a gender spectrum. Outside of the gender binary, I mean. There's another passage about eunuchs. Because there is a Roman legionnaire I cannot find that passage right now. That is one I'm going to have to go over later because we are running out of time. But at no point, if any conservative ever tells you that Jesus condemned gay or trans people, at any point, this is objectively false. Objectively false. There is nothing. Jesus said nothing about this, which means I would say that Jesus did not see much of an issue here, right? So, yeah. Yeah, Jesus did not see much of an issue here. Never brings it up once. And Jesus definitely has some commentary on straight relationships, so, you know. If it's not important enough for Jesus to mention it, it can't be all that much of a problem. Very true. All right. I'm gonna have to wrap things up for the day. I hope you guys enjoyed this. What did you guys think? Did we enjoy ourselves? Did we learn things? Did we find new ways to annoy our evangelical family members at Easter? All right, good. So remember to like this stream, if you have not already, and if you would like to help me out, I am taking the next couple of days off. Thursday and Friday are generally my days off, so I'm going to be taking them off. Lord knows I need it. But if you would like to help me out so that I feel less guilty about taking days off, because whenever I don't make money on a Wednesday, I always feel guilty taking the next day off. I always am like, man, this is like a sign that I need to work today so that I can make money, because I didn't make any money yesterday. So, if you would like to help me out, the best way to help out is to become a member of my Patreon. That helps make sure that I have a standard income. I would like to get the Patreon to the point where I don't have to ask for tips anymore. That would be primo, fantastic. But if you would like to donate a tip, that is Mothman. No, that's the outreach. Mothman Mutual Aid Mothman Mutual Aid WV. Mothman Mutual Aid WV is the cash app for the outreach. Oliver Snow content is how I pay my bills. So, and that's a cash app and a Venmo. So if you would like to donate to that, that would be greatly appreciated. And again, if you do not have a way to donate monetarily, but you still want to help us out, there is a link in the link tree where you can put recipes. We are collecting recipes to put into a cookbook so that we can use that cookbook in order to God, my brain. In order to fundraise for our outreach fund. All right, I'm going to go ahead and read donos. A special thank you to... Give me a second. Sorry, I had a little burp. I hate it when that happens when I'm on stream. It makes me feel real embarrassed. A special thanks to Jennifer Davidson, Margaret Capehart, Jessica Bednarek, Ariana, Emma Price, Allison Hill, Lauren O'Connor, Mao, Nathan, Morgan Westerin, Eleanor Buxbaum, Jay Winia, Morgan May, Taylor Condra, River Johnson, Angelini Pellegrini, Faith Benamy, Kristen McSorley, Jacqueline Gordon, Devin Watson, Val Smith, Post Punk Pastor, Pauline Gibson, Lucas Kempe Cook, and John Borg. Thank you guys so much. And remember, guys, drink a water, eat a food, be kind to yourself, to your neighbor, and to the earth. Thank you guys so much for everything you do. I hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless.